The sheriff's deputy handed me the cease and desist letter on a Thursday morning, right as I was loading my grandfather's old fishing tackle into the truck. My hands were still dusty from the attic, where I'd found his journal, filled with 40 years of memories at our family's lake cabin. The deputy looked apologetic as he said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry about this, but you're being ordered to stay away from Willowbrook Lake indefinitely." I stared at the official letterhead, my heart sinking as I read the complaint, filed by one Karen Whitmore, a woman I'd never even met, who claimed our family had been trespassing on her lake for decades. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my grandfather's journal contained a secret that would change everything. By the time the story ends, Karen Whitmore would learn that sometimes, when you try to steal someone's heritage, you end up losing everything you thought you owned. Music swells briefly, then fades. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how one woman's greed turned my family's peaceful lake retreat into a battleground, and how the truth buried in a 90-year-old deed would serve justice in a way none of us saw coming. Let me take you back to where this all began. Willowbrook Lake sits nestled in the rolling hills of northern Michigan, about 2 hours from Grand Rapids. It's the kind of place where morning mist dances across the water and loons call through the silence of dawn. My great-grandfather, Thomas Mitchell, built our family cabin there in 1934 with his own hands rough-hewn logs, a stone chimney, and a wraparound porch that faces east toward the sunrise. For nearly 90 years, 4 generations of my family had spent summers at that cabin. I have memories stretching back to childhood of learning to fish with my dad off the old dock, helping my grandmother can peaches in that tiny kitchen, and falling asleep to the sound of waves lapping against the shore. The cabin wasn't just a vacation home, it was the heartbeat of our family's legacy. I inherited the property when my father passed away 3 years ago. Dad had always been the keeper of family traditions, the one who organized our annual summer reunions, who made sure the cabin was maintained and loved. After his death, I felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders like a familiar, comforting blanket. The cabin sits on about 3 acres of prime lakefront property, with a private beach and a boat launch that my grandfather had carved into the shoreline decades ago. The nearest neighbor had always been old Mrs. Henderson, a sweet widow who'd lived in her cottage year-round and who used to bring us fresh tomatoes from her garden every July. But last spring, Mrs. Henderson passed away at the age of 86, and her property went up for sale. That's when everything changed. Karen Whitmore bought the Henderson place in May, paying cash and closing in record time. I first saw her on a Saturday morning in June, standing on what used to be Mrs. Henderson's dock, surveying the lake with the calculating gaze of someone taking inventory. She was probably in her mid-50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of designer casual wear that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I walked over to introduce myself, thinking it would be nice to welcome a new neighbor. "Hi there," I called out with a friendly wave. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. Our family has the cabin just through those trees. Welcome to the lake." Karen turned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh yes," she said, her voice crisp and measured. "The Mitchell property. We need to have a conversation about that." The way she said "we need to have a conversation" made my stomach tighten, but I tried to keep things neighborly. "Of course. If there's anything you need to know about the area, I'd be happy to help. My family's been here for almost 90 years. "Exactly," Karen replied, and something in her tone made me take a step back. "That's going to be a problem." She didn't elaborate that day, just turned and walked back toward her cottage, leaving me standing on the dock with a growing sense of unease. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe she was just having a bad day or feeling overwhelmed by the movie. I was so wrong. 2 weeks later, I was at the cabin with my teenage daughter, Emma, and my son Jake, enjoying what had become our traditional start of summer weekend. We were grilling burgers on the deck when a black SUV pulled into our driveway. Karen Whitmore stepped out, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Karen called out, not bothering with pleasantries this time. "This is my attorney, Richard Pemberton. We need to discuss your family's unauthorized use of lakefront property." I set down my spatula, my heart starting to race. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" "This is our family's land. We have the deed." Karen's smile was razor sharp. "Actually, you don't. You have a deed to a cabin and the immediate surrounding property. But your family has been using lake access, beach area, and water rights that legally belong to the Willowbrook Lake Community Association. You've been trespassing for decades." The lawyer, Pemberton, stepped forward with a manila folder. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've done extensive research into the property records. Your family's deed covers the cabin and approximately 1 acre around it, but the lakefront access your family has been using is technically common area that requires community association membership and fees." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "That's impossible. My grandfather built our dock. We've been swimming off that beach my entire life." "Without proper authorization," Karen replied smoothly. "Now we're prepared to be reasonable about this. You can apply for community association membership. The initiation fee is $25,000 plus annual dues of $8,000. Or you can continue to use your cabin just without lake access. $25,000. I felt my knees go weak. My daughter Emma, who had been listening from the deck, came down to stand beside me. "Mom, what's happening?" "Nothing, sweetheart," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to me. "Just a misunderstanding." But Karen wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice taking on an almost gleeful tone. "The community association has voted to implement new noise restrictions and occupancy limits. No more large family gatherings. No more boats launching from private beaches. We're trying to restore the peaceful, exclusive atmosphere this lake deserves." I looked at this woman, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and was trying to strip away everything my family held dear, and I felt something crack inside my chest. "You can't do this," I whispered. "Actually, we can," Pemberton said, not unkindly, but with professional finality. "We'll give you 30 days to decide. Membership application or restricted access. Those are your options." They left me standing in my own driveway, holding a folder full of legal documents I couldn't afford to fight, watching everything I'd inherited from 4 generations of my family slip away like morning mist. That night, after Emma and Jake had gone to bed, I sat on the porch swing my father had built, staring out at the lake that suddenly felt like a stranger. The moon cast a silver path across the water, the same path I'd watched thousands of times before, and I wondered if this would be one of the last times I'd see it from this spot. But I had no idea that in 3 days, Karen Whitmore would escalate this far beyond money. The harassment started small, the way these things always do. On Tuesday, I found orange spray paint marking trees along what I had always believed was our property line, with NOTRESP, ASSI, and G signs zip-tied to the trunks. On Wednesday, someone had put up a chain across the path we'd always used to get to our dock, with a padlock and a laminated sign that read PRIV a TEPROPEIAOL, TIUA TIOALA, TRLSS ZUTAIEE. I called the county clerk's office that morning, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Hi, I need to verify the boundaries on my property deed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There seems to be some confusion about where my land ends." The clerk, a kind-sounding woman named Beth, put me on hold for what felt like forever. When she came back, her voice was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've pulled your file. According to the recorded deed from 1934, your property boundary ends approximately 50 feet from the cabin foundation. The lakefront area appears to be designated as community access under the Willowbrook Lake Community Association Charter from 1952. My heart sank. But we've been using that beach for 90 years. Doesn't that count for something? I'm not a lawyer, honey, Beth said sympathetically, but you might want to look into something called adverse possession. Sometimes, long-term use can establish property rights. You'd need to talk to an attorney. An attorney. I did the math in my head: consultation fees, research costs, potential court battles. Even if I won, I'd be financially ruined by the process. Karen Whitmore knew exactly what she was doing. But the legal pressure was just the beginning. By Thursday, Karen had recruited allies. I was at the local grocery store in town, picking up supplies for the weekend, when I ran into Margaret Sullivan, whose family owned a cottage on the other side of the lake. Margaret had always been friendly. Our kids had played together during summers, and we'd shared more than a few conversations over the years about the joys and challenges of maintaining lake property. "Sarah," Margaret called out. But when I turned toward her with a smile, her expression was oddly cold. "I heard about your situation with the community association." "Oh, hi, Margaret." "Yeah, it's been a bit stressful. I'm trying to figure out the best way forward." Margaret shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if she was worried someone might overhear us. "Look, Sarah, I don't want to get involved, but some of the other property owners have been talking. We all love your family, but the truth is, property values have gotten so high around here. People are concerned about maintaining the right kind of neighborhood." The words hit me like a slap. "What do you mean, the right kind of neighborhood?" "You know how it is," Margaret said, her voice dropping to an uncomfortable whisper. "Your family's gatherings have gotten pretty large over the years. All those cars, the music, kids running around. Some people think it's time to, set some boundaries." I stared at her, this woman whose daughter had learned to swim in our cove, whose family had joined our 4th of July barbecues for 15 years. "Margaret, are you saying you support what Karen is doing?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm not saying I support anything. I'm just saying that maybe it's time for everyone to follow the same rules." I left the grocery store feeling more alone than I had since my father's funeral. It wasn't just Karen anymore. She was turning my own neighbors against me, using their fear of property devaluation and their discomfort with change to build a coalition. That weekend, things got worse. My son Jake had brought 2 of his college friends up to the lake for what we thought might be our last normal weekend at the cabin. They were good kids, quiet, respectful, the kind of young men who helped with dishes and asked permission before using the boat. On Saturday evening, we were having a small fire on the beach, maybe 8 people total, when sheriff's deputies showed up. "Ma'am," the lead deputy said, his flashlight cutting through the gathering darkness, "we've had reports of a large, unauthorized gathering on community property. I'm going to need to ask you and your guests to move back to your cabin." "This is our beach," I said, though my voice sounded weak even to me. "My grandfather built that fire ring in 1945. The deputy looked genuinely sorry. "Ma'am, I have a legal complaint here, signed by the president of the Willowbrook Lake Community Association. According to this document, you're in violation of community noise ordinances and trespassing on association property." I looked over toward Karen's cottage and saw her silhouette in the window, watching our humiliation with what I could only imagine was satisfaction. We moved the fire to our tiny back deck, cramming 8 people into a space meant for 4, and I felt something inside me die a little. Jake's friends were embarrassed. My daughter Emma was near tears, and I was drowning in helplessness. "Mom," Emma said quietly after the others had gone inside, "why is she doing this to us?" I didn't have an answer. I still didn't understand what Karen Whitmore wanted beyond the power to destroy something beautiful that didn't belong to her. Sunday brought a new escalation. I woke up to find that someone had cut the rope securing our dock to the shore. Our family's old aluminum boat, which had been tied to the dock, was floating loose about 50 yards out in the lake. Jake had to swim out in the freezing water to retrieve it. But that wasn't the worst part. Painted across the dock in dripping red letters were the words TRESPASSARSNOT WELCOME. I called the sheriff's office to report the vandalism, and Deputy Martinez came out to take pictures and write up a report. He was a young man, probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a genuine desire to help. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said as he photographed the graffiti, "I have to ask, do you have any idea who might have done this?" I looked toward Karen's cottage, where I could see her on her deck with a cup of coffee, watching us with unconcealed interest. "I have suspicions, but no proof." Deputy Martinez followed my gaze and nodded slowly. "I understand this situation has gotten complicated, but vandalism is vandalism, regardless of any property disputes. If you can think of anyone who might have information about this incident, please let me know." After he left, I sat on my porch, feeling defeated and scared. This wasn't just about money anymore. Someone was trying to terrorize my family into abandoning our heritage, and they were succeeding. That evening, I got a phone call from my brother David, who lived in Arizona and rarely made it to the lake anymore. "Sarah," he said, his voice tight with worry, "I just got a call from someone named Karen Whitmore. She said she wanted to make me aware of the situation with the family property." My blood turned to ice. "What exactly did she say?" "She said you were being unreasonable about complying with community association rules, and that if our family didn't come to the table, she might have to pursue legal action against all the property heirs." Sarah, she had my phone number, my address. She knew about my business. How did she get that information? The realization hit me like a physical blow. Karen wasn't just trying to drive us away from the lake. She was researching my family, building a case, preparing for a war I didn't even know I was fighting. "David, I need you to know something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am not giving up the cabin. I don't care what it costs or how ugly this gets. Dad left it to us for a reason." There was a long pause before David replied. "Sarah, I love that place too, but we can't bankrupt ourselves fighting someone who obviously has unlimited resources. Maybe we should think about selling." After I hung up, I realized that Karen's strategy was working perfectly. She was isolating me from potential allies, making the fight so expensive and unpleasant that surrender would seem like the rational choice. But she had made one crucial mistake. She assumed I would fight like a reasonable person, following normal rules and procedures. What she didn't know was that desperation makes people dangerous in ways they never expected. And in 2 days, I would discover something in my grandfather's journal that would change the entire game. Tuesday morning, I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I climbed up into the cabin's dusty attic, looking for any old documents that might help my case. The attorney I'd consulted had mentioned that sometimes property disputes could be resolved with historical evidence, and I was desperate enough to grasp at any straw. The attic was exactly as my father had left it 3 years ago. Dusty cardboard boxes labeled in his careful handwriting, old fishing equipment, and furniture covered with yellowed bedsheets. I was methodically going through a box marked Dad's papers when I found my grandfather Thomas's leather-bound journal. I'd seen the journal before, of course, but I'd always assumed it was just his personal diary, filled with mundane details about cabin repairs and fishing trips. But as I sat on the attic floor, reading by the light of a bare bulb, I realized it was so much more than that. The early entries, dating back to 1934, told the story of my great-grandfather's negotiations to buy the land. But it was an entry from July 15, 1952 that made my heart stop. Met with Howard Pemberton today about the Community Association Charter. He's worried about property taxes going up if all the lakefront is individually owned, so he's proposing this association scheme. I told him the Mitchell land stays private. We bought water rights from the county back in '34, and I'll be damned if I'm giving them up now. Pemberton says the association charter will have an exception for existing deeded water rights. Made sure it's in writing. Filed the copy with the county clerk tomorrow. Howard Pemberton. The lawyer currently representing Karen was named Richard Pemberton. Could they be related? With shaking hands, I kept reading. Entry after entry detailed my grandfather's careful protection of our family's water rights, his involvement in the formation of the community association, and most importantly, his insistence that the Mitchell property maintain its original deeded privileges. There was more. A 1958 entry mentioned a dispute with another neighbor who tried to challenge our dock rights, showed Henderson the original county deed and the association exemption papers. He apologized and admitted he was wrong. Sometimes people forget that not all properties around here are the same. I climbed down from the attic with the journal clutched against my chest, my mind racing. If my grandfather was right, if we had never actually given up our water rights, then Karen's entire case was built on false premises. But I needed proof beyond a journal entry, no matter how detailed. The county clerk's office opened at 8 a.m. Wednesday morning, and I was waiting in the parking lot at 7:45. Beth, the kind clerk I'd spoken with before, looked surprised to see me back so soon. "Mrs. Mitchell, what can I help you with today?" "Beth, I need to see the original documents for the Willowbrook Lake Community Association Charter from 1952. Specifically, I need to know if there were any exemptions filed for existing properties." She frowned thoughtfully. "That's going back a long way. Those records would be in our archive storage. It might take me a while to dig them up." "I'll wait," I said, settling into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. "I'll wait as long as it takes." 3 hours later, Beth emerged from the back room with a dusty file folder and a triumphant smile. "Found them," she announced, "and you're going to want to see this." The documents she spread across the counter were yellowed with age, but still legally binding. The original Community Association Charter was exactly as Karen's lawyer had described, giving the association control over most lakefront access around the lake. But attached to it, in my grandfather's careful handwriting, was a formal exemption document. "Property Deed 1934, Mitchell 3. Beth read aloud, "Hereby retains all original water rights, lake access, and shoreline privileges as granted in the original county conveyance. This exemption is acknowledged by the Willowbrook Lake Community Association and shall remain in perpetuity with the Mitchell property." The document was signed by my grandfather, by Howard Pemberton as the association's first president, and by the county clerk. Most importantly, it was officially notarized and filed. "Beth," I whispered, "this means our water rights were never transferred to the community association, doesn't it?" She nodded slowly, studying the documents. "Honey, as far as I can tell, your family never lost those rights. This exemption should supersede any current association claims." I felt like I could barely breathe. Why didn't this come up when Karen's lawyer did his research? Beth looked uncomfortable. "Well, these exemption documents were filed separately from the main charter. Unless someone specifically knew to look for them, they might not show up in a standard property search. Plus, the current association leadership might not even know these exemptions exist. Or, I thought grimly, they knew and chose to ignore them." I paid for certified copies of everything and drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. But even with this discovery, I knew the fight was far from over. Karen and her lawyer would claim the documents were invalid, or that the association had somehow superseded them over the decades. I needed more than just paperwork, I needed leverage. That evening, I did something that felt slightly unethical, but absolutely necessary. I started researching Karen Whitmore. It took me 3 hours of internet searching, but eventually, I found what I was looking for. Karen Whitmore wasn't just some wealthy woman who'd bought a lake house on a whim. She was a real estate developer from Grand Rapids who specialized in something called lakefront consolidation projects. Her company, Whitmore Development, had a website that made my blood run cold. Project after project showed the same pattern: buy one property in a desirable lakefront area, then systematically pressure neighboring property owners to sell through legal challenges and community restrictions until she controlled enough land to develop luxury resorts. Willowbrook Lake was just her latest target. But the most interesting thing I found was a lawsuit from 2019 where she'd tried the same tactics on a lake in northern Wisconsin. A family had fought back and won, exposing her methods in court documents that were still available online. The Wisconsin case gave me a roadmap, but more importantly, it gave me a name: Jennifer Castellanos, the attorney who had successfully defended the Wisconsin family. I called Jennifer's office first thing Thursday morning. "Mrs. Castellanos," I said, when she finally took my call, "my name is Sarah Mitchell, and I think Karen Whitmore is trying to steal my family's lake property. I found your name in connection with a case in Wisconsin." There was a long pause before Jennifer spoke, and when she did, her voice was grim. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've been expecting a call like this for 2 years. Karen Whitmore doesn't give up on targets. She just moves to new lakes. Tell me what's happened so far." I spent an hour detailing everything: the harassment, the legal threats, the community association claims, and most importantly, the exemption documents I'd found. "Those exemption documents are gold," Jennifer said when I finished. "But more importantly, if Karen is running her usual pattern, she's probably violated several laws in the process. In Wisconsin, we were able to prove harassment, property fraud, and conspiracy to deprive property rights. What do you need from me?" "Documentation of everything. Every interaction, every threat, every incident of harassment. And I need you to do something that might feel uncomfortable. I need you to give Karen Whitmore enough rope to hang herself with." Jennifer's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of immediately challenging Karen with the exemption documents, we would let her continue escalating her illegal behavior while we documented everything. Then, when we had an airtight case, we would spring the trap. "There's one more thing," Jennifer said. "In the Wisconsin case, Karen tried to frame the legal fight as a simple property dispute. But when we exposed her development plans, the community turned against her. Does she have development plans for your lake?" I thought about the systematic way Karen was eliminating family properties and traditional lake uses. "I think she's planning something big," I said, "but I don't know what yet." "Find out," Jennifer advised. "And Mrs. Mitchell? Be careful. When Karen realizes she's been caught, she gets desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things." Friday evening, I was sitting on my porch, reading my grandfather's journal for the dozenth time, when I saw Karen walking down the path toward our cabin. She wasn't with her lawyer this time. She was alone, and something about her demeanor set off alarm bells. "Sarah," she called out in a voice that was trying too hard to sound friendly, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Can we talk?" But as she got closer, I could see her expression more clearly. This wasn't a peace offering. This was reconnaissance. What Karen didn't know was that Jennifer Castellanos had already filed our preliminary legal documents that morning, and by Monday, the real battle would begin. "I've been doing some thinking," Karen said, settling uninvited into the chair across from me on the porch. "Maybe we were both a little heated in our previous conversations. I'd like to make you a more reasonable offer. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart was pounding. What kind of offer? Karen leaned forward with what she probably thought was a sincere smile. I'll pay for your community association membership. All $25,000, plus the first year's dues. In exchange, you agree to limit your family gatherings to immediate family only. No more big reunions, no more parties. Just quiet family time. It was actually a generous offer, financially speaking. But I could see the calculation behind it. Karen was worried about something. Maybe her research had turned up problems with her legal position, or maybe she was feeling pressure from somewhere else. That's very generous, I said carefully, but I need to think about it. Karen's smile tightened. Sarah, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but my patience isn't unlimited. There are other ways to resolve this situation. What's that supposed to mean? She stood up abruptly, her mask of friendliness slipping. It means that property disputes can get very expensive and very ugly. It means that sometimes the county finds code violations that require expensive remediation. It means that sometimes insurance companies get concerned about liability issues on older properties. The threat was crystal clear. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I also felt something else, anger. Pure, righteous anger at this woman who thought she could intimidate me into surrendering my family's heritage. Karen, I said, standing up to face her, I think you should leave now. Her eyes flashed with something ugly. You're making a mistake, Sarah. I always get what I want, one way or another. She stalked back toward her cottage, and I immediately went inside to call Jennifer Castellanos. She just threatened me, I told Jennifer. Insurance problems, code violations. She's going to try to make owning the cabin so expensive that I have to sell. Perfect, Jennifer said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. She's following her usual script exactly. Did you record the conversation? I felt stupid. No, I didn't think. Don't worry about it. But from now on, record everything. Phone app, security camera, whatever you can manage. We need her to keep digging her own grave. Monday morning brought the first salvo in our legal counterattack. Jennifer filed a motion in county court challenging the community association's authority over our property, backed by the exemption documents from 1952. She also filed a harassment complaint against Karen personally, documenting every incident of intimidation and property damage. By noon, my phone was ringing off the hook. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Richard Pemberton. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. Pemberton's voice was tight with what sounded like panic, which gave me a small spark of satisfaction. What kind of misunderstanding, Mr. Pemberton? These exemption documents your attorney has filed. I need to research their validity. The association may have been operating under incomplete information. Take all the time you need, I said sweetly. We'll be here. But Karen wasn't content to wait for lawyers to sort things out. Tuesday evening brought a new escalation that crossed lines I hadn't even known existed. I was having dinner with Emma when we heard the sound of multiple vehicles coming up our driveway. Through the window, I could see headlights at least 3 cars and what looked like a pickup truck. Mom, who is that? Emma asked, moving closer to me. I don't know, honey. Stay inside. I stepped out onto the porch as the vehicles parked and men started getting out. There were 6 of them, all wearing matching t-shirts that said Willowbrook Security. They were big, intimidating men who moved with the kind of coordination that suggested military or police backgrounds. Karen emerged from the lead car, her face hard with determination. Sarah Mitchell, she announced loudly, you are trespassing on community association property. These gentlemen are here to ensure that you comply with a court order to vacate. I felt my mouth go dry. What court order? No one has served me with any court order. One of the security men, a massive guy with arms like tree trunks, stepped forward with a clipboard. Ma'am, we have documentation that this property is in violation of multiple community association regulations. We're authorized to secure the area. I pulled out my phone and immediately called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sarah Mitchell at 1247 Lakeshore Drive. There are 6 men on my property claiming to have some kind of court order, but I haven't been served with anything. I think someone is trying to illegally force me off my land. The dispatcher was calm and professional. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? I looked at the 6 large men spreading out across my property, setting up what looked like a perimeter. I honestly don't know. Stay inside your home. Deputies are on the way. I went back inside and deadbolted the door, pulling Emma away from the windows. Outside, I could hear Karen directing the men, telling them to secure all access points and document any safety violations. The sheriff's deputies arrived within 10 minutes, but those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. Emma was crying, and I was torn between terror and rage at what Karen was putting my daughter through. Deputy Martinez was the first officer through the door after I let them in. Mrs. Mitchell, are you okay? What exactly is happening here? That woman, I said, pointing toward Karen through the window, brought 6 men to my property claiming they have some kind of court order, but I've never been served with any order, and I don't believe they have legal authority to be here. Martinez went outside to investigate, and I could see him having an animated conversation with Karen and the lead security man. It lasted about 15 minutes before Martinez came back inside. Mrs. Mitchell, they don't have a valid court order. What they have is a community association resolution authorizing property inspections, but that doesn't give them authority to force entry or restrict your movements. I've told them they need to leave. Through the window, I watched Karen's face contort with fury as the security team packed up their equipment. Before getting into her car, she turned toward my cabin and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "This isn't over, Sarah. You can't hide behind technicalities forever." After they left, Martinez sat down with me to write up an incident report. Mrs. Mitchell, I have to tell you, I'm concerned about this escalation. What started as a property dispute is starting to look like harassment and intimidation. Officer, can I ask you something? How did Karen get authorization to bring security guards onto my property? Even if the association had some kind of inspection rights, wouldn't they need to go through proper legal channels? Martinez nodded thoughtfully. That's a good question. In my experience, people who bring private security to civil disputes usually have something to hide. Have you considered that maybe Mrs. Whitmore isn't as confident about her legal position as she's pretending to be? That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, I called Jennifer Castellanos and described the evening's events. She brought armed security guards to your home? Jennifer's voice was sharp with professional interest. Sarah, that's not just harassment anymore. That's criminal intimidation. And more importantly, it means she's getting desperate. What do you mean? People with strong legal cases don't resort to private armies. They file motions and wait for court dates. Karen knows something about her position is weak, and she's trying to force a resolution before we can expose it. Jennifer was quiet for a moment before continuing. I think it's time to spring our trap. Tomorrow, we file our full countersuit: property fraud, harassment, criminal conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But there's something else. I want to request an emergency hearing to examine the community association's legal authority. What kind of hearing? The kind where we force Richard Pemberton to explain under oath how he missed a 60-year-old exemption document that completely invalidates his client's case. The kind where we ask Karen Whitmore to explain her development company's business plan for Willowbrook Lake. I felt a fierce surge of hope when I'll file the motion first thing tomorrow morning. In civil cases like this, Judges usually schedule emergency hearings within a week. Sarah, I want you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. But I was ready for ugly. After watching my daughter cry herself to sleep because strange men had invaded our safe space, I was ready for whatever Karen Whitmore wanted to throw at me. What I wasn't prepared for was the phone call I received Wednesday morning, just hours before Jennifer was supposed to file our countersuit.